properly plan a warehouse, to properly consider the requirements before going out. So unlike many ambient operating warehouses where you can improvise, where you can adjust over time, a cold store requires poor planning up front because you don't have the flexibility to adjust, and you definitely have high costs going into the wrong direction if it's built badly. Some examples you find them here on the slides where we want to isolate cold stores, where we want to provide for some airlocks. In the end, we want to open and close these airlocks as few times as possible. We heard that also this morning, the danger of temperature getting into the warehouse, endangering the safety of our food. At the same time, whilst we don't want to penetrate the cold store too often, we don't want to have too much traffic in and out, we have to consider that the labor, the people will not be able to work inside a minus 25, 28 degree environment for extended period of time. But at the same time, we have to assure the integrity of the temperature that the products themselves are disposable. And we heard it also, I think, several times, data is the thing. So when we do planning, we need information, we need data, we need to know what the requirements are, we need to know what the operations are, and only then would we be able to select the correct solution for our warehouse. One factor in planning is also whether it's a greenfield or a retrofit. Unfortunately, most of the times we find something in between. We have a greenfield site, but the building is decided before the actual operation is determined. So we are, in fact, implementing a greenfield solution into a retrofit building. And that is the dangerous things that we face all over the place. Retrofitting has its benefits. We can usually stay in those areas which are most relevant to run the business. It goes along with sustainability goals in general, but on a greenfield site, we are much more flexible to really build the warehouse to suit the requirements, to optimize it to a degree where the storage density fits the requirements, where the performance of the system fits the requirements, where you can implement proper floor structures depending on the system that you put on top, where you can implement proper shapes to go along with the solution that you're looking at. But it is one of the constraints that we will face, that we have to face when implementing and planning and implementing the cold store. And then the most dominant question that everybody is asking these days: should I go for manual? Should I go for semi-automated? Should I go for an automated solution? And there's definitely no answer that suits everybody. It really depends on the requirement. Manual warehouses, also in cold store, they have their right of existence, as have semi-automated and fully automated. Manual operations are in general considered more economical, but that has a limit as well. The economical aspect is endangered by not adhering to a properly, I mentioned earlier, closed up building. The more you penetrate through, and in our manual operations, you have a lot of traffic going in and out of the warehouse. You're facing the problem of condensation and icing, which in the end has an impact on the efficiency of your warehouse, cooling, on dangerous environment with icing, with people possibly slipping around, things like that. So, and all these factors that you see here listed in the end harm the economics of a manual operation. It is the lowest investment, but in the end you also have to look at the long-term cost and the long-term operation of such a facility. Then we have semi-automated cold store operations, which to a certain extent live from the advantages of automation by implementing partial automation. You don't have that full investment, that full expense of a fully automated solution. you can save manpower, but you're not, depending on the level of automation that you implement, you're not avoiding the problems of a manual operation altogether. So it is a stepwise approach to see what can I eliminate, what problem area can I eliminate, with kind of level of automation that I could. And then we have the fully automated operations, which typically go along with long-term strategies. I know for the 3D elements too, that is always a very difficult aspect. But again, building in some flexibility, that problem can also be overcome in the end. An automated investment is always looking at long-term. You have a high initial investment, yes, we all know that, but over time it amortizes and eventually becomes still, for a certain requirement, the most efficient, most safe environment. With automation, you can avoid a lot of problems, the penetration in and out of the warehouse, the design of the warehouse, including how we can optimize. You can avoid a lot of these problems that they have in manual or semi-automated environment. There was a discussion this morning in the panel where we talked about robotics in an automated warehouse. I will address that at a later time, and I believe that can be overcome. So what are the solutions? What are the typical solutions that we find in automated or in a warehouse in general? The simplest, the easiest, the cheapest approach is still the conventional block stack, which you will find in a lot of operations, and which still has a place, provided that the requirement allows to implement this kind of, let's call it technology. Block stack, we are pretty much limited. Pallets are never stacked properly, so if you stack pallets on top of each other, you have your limits on how you can do it. But what you achieve with block stack is a very, very high density. So the build-up volume over the volume that you actually utilize for pallet storage can be quite optimized. So you can apply this if you have homogeneous, very few SKUs in high numbers, where you just dump everything into a code room, considering that you will not be able to easily reach the pallet at the bottom. It's nicely seen on these photos. And that in the end, one problem we always have in food, first in, first out, is very difficult to achieve with this kind of environment. So a big batch of one single product for Singapore as a trading hub, this is still the way to go, and you see it here. But when it comes to order fulfillment, case picking, multiple SKUs, this is definitely not the solution. Part of that problem can be overcome with these stackable pallet cages or pallet converters, but again, there's only limits. You can probably reach bigger heights. The safety aspect of stacking pallets on top of each other can be overcome, but the logistic problem, the problem of moving the product in and out, still remains. Then we have the traditional storage methods in pallet racking, and you will find it in most of the ambient operations. Now, selective pallet rack is definitely a solution that in a cold store environment should not be the preferred approach. Selective racking, you have the pallet, you've got the 3.5 meter aisle, and you've got the pallet on the other side. The main part of the warehouse is air, and who wants to clean air? That's only cost that doesn't lead to anything. So what we should always try to do is to optimize this environment and find alternatives, provided the requirements, the throughput, picking operation, the order fulfillment allow to do so. The first step to increase the storage density is the very narrow aisle arrangement, where the aisle gets reduced from 3.5 to roughly 1.8 meters, depending on the equipment that you employ. These systems also allow you to build higher, so you can save footprint, but overall you have a much better volume utilization of the warehouse. There's less void air that you need to keep cool, and you still have the full access, the full selectivity to each and every one of the products. And so that could be one approach if you say that painted black and white now, you have 10,000 pallets in your store and you have 10,000 SKUs. This is often still the way to go to allow selectivity. Then we have more dense options, provided the material handling equipment is in place. We can configure the pallet racking in a double D configuration, which gives you a little bit of constraint because the back pallet in the end is not immediately accessible. It could lead to mistakes, will lead to additional handling if you have an extremely high SKU range, but at least the density can also be improved. The next step in even higher density is drive-in pallet rack, which we also see very, very often out there. Drive-in pallet rack, you have the forklift drive into the rack and store the pallet at whatever level you need. Problem is that in many countries this kind of operation is very accident prone because the handling equipment is actually driving into the rack with the frames left and right. So operational issues are very, very dominant in, as I said, several countries. The other problem is that here you're getting very, very close to the block stack that I showed at the very beginning. In the end, you're very limited in accessing your pallets. Once you have a pallet on the floor, the truck cannot drive in anymore to put the pallet on top. So you have basically the whole channel over all levels that relies on proper access, which again reduces the number of SKUs that you can store. And then at the same time, it's first in, last out. So not really a solution for a modern, I would say, cold store operation. As I said at the beginning, order fulfillment, increasing SKU range, selectivity, access to the product is pretty much endangered in this kind of environment. There's more to this. We have pallet life storage, which is also a channel storage, just that you separate between inbound and outbound, so you feed the pallets on one end onto a pallet flow rack and you retrieve it on the other side. Good for first in, first out. Good for full pallet loads. Again, difficult when it comes to order picking, case picking, piece picking, whatever there may be. And then we have the pushback racking, which is the whole thing in reverse, first in, last out, because you push the pallet backwards as more pallets are added, and then the pallets come out of the front. So that is less likely to be an option for a cold store, but I just want to mention it here for completeness to increase the awareness of the alternatives. And then we have first step into semi-automated solutions, and I think that's where it gets very, very interesting for cold store operations. On one hand, we have the channel storage, which is an alternative to the drive-in racking. And then we have the mobile racking, which is an alternative to selective racking. So the first one, the channel storage, is again bulk storage. Yes, admittedly, good in the production, at the end of production. And mobile racking is giving us access to each and every pallet with a little bit of a throughput constraint that needs to be considered, but allows us to really fulfill orders down to case or piece picking level. So channel storage, just a little bit more detail, drive-in, but the advantage is what we do in channel storage is we have a satellite that goes into the rack on behalf of the forklift truck, and it can be individually operated on each level, so you don't have a constraint that when there's a pallet on the floor you can't reach the top anymore. You don't have the danger of a forklift truck to drive into the channel. This is all done by the satellite. And the added advantage is that these satellites can operate from both sides of the channel. So you can either run such an operation first in, last out, but you can also run it first in, first out, which is more relevant with food cold storage. And then I mentioned the mobile racking system, which is basically selective racking that is based onto a mobile platform, and you just shift the racking back and forth to open aisles to gain access to the products. So you do have full selectivity. You can reach every single pallet individually in such kind of operation. But in order to increase the storage density, we limit the number of aisles to do so. So the only slightly negative aspect is that it takes a little bit of time to open another aisle, but with proper planning, or if you're in an environment with not so high throughput, this is actually the solution to go. If you look around the region here of Southeast Asia, Middle East, I would say that about 70%, maybe 80% of all postal operations do have a mobile racking inside in one or the other way. In the end, you will find that when you do the analysis of your requirements, a combination of several systems is usually best. So it's not good to say, okay, I have to choose this one now, and okay, I have to take that one disadvantage, but it's always good to consider that maybe some range of the operation is better done in bulk storage with a satellite solution, with a channel storage, and others require picking in a mobile rig, or maybe even one retention. It's also a possibility. Now, how do we operate all these systems? We're still having a scenario where the operator is going into the rack to assess the product. Now, the operator is running around in 20, 25, 28 degree minus, depending on the country. One way of making this life easier and safer is to give him material handling equipment to not work when we have to conduct basic cleaning inside our warehouse. The other thing to apply to make our warehouse airtight, to limit the penetration through the wall, to limit the access, is the use of conveyors. And we put fast shutters in there, maybe even an anti-room to adapt to different temperatures. So what you could do is then have a heated cabin or even an AGV operate inside the warehouse, drop the pallet onto the conveyor, let the conveyor transport it safely out of the cold store, no problems in condensation, no problems or limited problems in condensation, no problems in icing, and then conduct the picking of the pallet in a different environment outside of the warehouse. One way of reducing the manpower inside our cold stores. And then, last but not least, we have the fully automated systems. So the fully automated system, we won't have anyone inside the warehouse, and we will try to automate as many processes as we could economically do, always considering the long-term strategy, ROI, whatever we are doing. There is no doubt that this is the highest investment of all, and it should be done really greenfield with building only design after the solution is in place, but in the long term it will provide a lot of benefits, and once the ROI is achieved, we will certainly have a big gain on such kind of operation. One problem, I heard it this morning, is when we talk about cold store, automated cold store, we always think in ASLS. And that is something that I think everybody should forget. There is plenty of storage options available in the market. Just for us, there is much more than just the traditional storage and retrieval machine. In the end, the choice which equipment we apply, whether it's a storage and retrieval machine, whether it is a pallet shuttle, whether it's a layered tray shuttle, whether it's a carton shuttle, whether it whatever the technology is, robotics, AMRs, it all depends on what you want to do outside of the warehouse. How often do I need to get my product out? What does my order fulfillment, my picking strategy look like? How can I best fulfill my order fulfillment requirements? So we should not focus on storage and say storage is the SRS. We should look at what's happening outside of the warehouse, the fulfillment. How do I want to fulfill? I want to support my fulfillment. What storage solution is fitting for that? So the picking is in the focus, and I want to correct one statement that has been made here earlier. Robotics picking in cold store is possible. Normally in a cold store there should not be any condensation. Yes, icing condensation is a problem for any kind of technology. But if we apply robotics inside the cold store at -20, -25, -28 degrees, this is safe. Can be done typically on case pick level. Good. Some quick examples before I close. Should be good on time here. I'm just showing you a few automated examples, very, very briefly, just to point out some differences in the approach. So what you see here is a facility that is really just about storage, pallets in, pallets out. And what you can see here is that the warehouse itself is an ASRS, but it's multiple deep. So an ASRS environment, multiple deep. You can see it from the image. The air around the pallets is very little. So we have an extremely high storage density by putting a satellite onto a stacker crane to fulfill that pallets in, pallets out requirement. The cooling equipment is sitting inside the warehouse. This is one aspect, maybe just briefly to mention. There's a belief that a cold store cannot be built high because of the temperature distribution over the height. With the right equipment, with the right know-how, with the right people on board, it can be done. So we build cold stores -25 degrees at 40 meters height, and we can still assure the same temperature across all levels. Then there's a shipping buffer in here with a sequencer, and then the pallets go out. This is a totally different environment. So here there is an extremely high case picking requirement. So what was decided to do in this particular project is to store still double deep, which gives you high density combined with medium performance, but that the actual case picking is happening with an additional case buffer. So there is another storage system which is then storing loose cases. The depalletizing, in this case, is done manually, but that could also be done automated. So robots can depalletize, singularize the cartons. You store them in the case buffer, and then you retrieve them out of the case buffer at a high frequency, manually or automatically stack them back onto a pallet and send them out. So this kind of environment, you can realize it fully automated. In this case, like I said, there is some manual aspect to it, again, out of investment and benefit considerations. And then it should be buffer to get out of that. Here's another example for a pure pallet in, pallet out operation, where you can again see multiple deep storage from an ASRS. And this is a nice example from around the corner in the Philippines. I mentioned the 40-meter height. This is happening here, where the focus of the warehouse is again predominantly full pallet storage and full pallet retrieval with occasional case picks. So here, stacker cranes in a double deep configuration can either deliver pallets directly out or into a manually operated picking area, which is operating at 4 degrees in the positive. The pallets come out, people pick the cases, and the pallet goes back into the warehouse through the respective anti-looms to maintain the project. And one last project that is going up here in Singapore as we speak, supposed to go live relatively soon, but it got delayed because of COVID. a warehouse after production with a total of 85,000 pallets, increase environment. Again, we are talking about 40-meter height, predominantly pallet in, pallet out, with the occasional case pick that is happening. You see this short string on the left outside where pallets are delivered for picking until they're empty. It's production, it's low school range, so we don't need to return not big pallets into the warehouse too frequently. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. I will just repeat. Proper planning, think it through, talk to the right people to help you during this exercise, and select the equipment that fits your strategy and in the long run gives you the best benefits. There is no solution that fits all. It has to really be individually addressed. Thank you very much.